Every day, you're influenced whether you realize it or not. From the ads you scroll past, to the way your boss frames an idea, to the subtle tug of guilt in a friend's voice. Influence isn't just sales tactics, it's the operating system of human connection. Today, we're diving into Robert Cialdini's classic Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion, and connecting it to Edward Bernays' propaganda and Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence. Together, they reveal how minds are guided, emotions are shaped, and choices are often not as free as we think.
Every year, Amazon says to its employees who work getting the shipments out, if you quit, we will give you $5,000. Almost nobody does. To leave their job and the security of it and whatever that Amazon provides, almost nobody does. But Jeff Bezos says, the reason I do that is because I want them to commit to us, even in the face of a reason not to stay with us. If they have made that choice in a costly way, it tells them, I want to be here. I like this job. I want to continue and do as well as I can.
This is the You Only Podcast. I'm Lo Jackson. Thank you for tuning back in, fans. Today, we're going to be going over a great book. I don't know if you have ever heard of Robert Cialdini, but he has written one of the greatest books. It's called Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. He talks about reciprocity or being reciprocal. We feel compelled to give back when someone gives first. I feel that in a society where we are trying to build the American dream, reciprocity is hard to do in America when you're trying to build that emergency nest egg, take care of your family, take care of your responsibilities, and be an all-around great individual. Mr. Cialdini talks about the commitment and consistency. So once we commit to something, we must act to stay consistent, because if we don't, it's easy to fall back into our normal thinking patterns of that routine that we're always on. And if you want to break up a routine that you've had for a long time, it takes changing your paradigm and forcing yourself to socialize when normally you would be at home secluded by yourself. Mr. Cialdini talks about social proof. We copy what others are doing, especially under uncertainty. A lot of times that has to do with the certain types of appeals that we're going through as well, like your appeal to authority. We talked about that in my last podcast. Robert Greene talked about how the guy in the lab coat told the person to give another person shock therapy. And the person did it just because this guy was wearing a white lab coat and they appealed to his authority. So they were shocking people for no reason.
If somebody's trying to influence me, and I've read my book, and I know that they're trying to, I should not be automatically resistant to that. I should only be resistant to the person who's trying to manipulate me into yes by claiming to be an authority when he or she isn't. I do want to follow the person who's the genuine authority, for example. I do want to follow the person who gives me true information that what they are recommending is consistent with an existing commitment that I've already made, a priority that I have in my life. Or I do want to be vulnerable to the appeals of someone who tells me about a genuinely unique or dwindling availability that has value to me. All of those things are influence dimensions along which I want.
Mr. Cialdini talks about liking. We say yes to people we like. We say no to people we don't like. And if we're aware of the yes and no's in life, of how we use those tools to actually empower ourselves and to set ourselves aside from other people in society, it is a powerful tool to be able to tell someone. And once you're comfortable with telling somebody no, you will realize you've stepped into a new domain of maturity. A lot of us live on impulses. If you look around in society right now, you go to Walmart or any grocery store, you will see impulse buying, you will see impulse decisions everywhere you look. When I see that in society and I know about maturity and impulse, I realize we live in an unmature society. And it is up to us as adults to gain the knowledge to train people that are around us that are younger, like, hey, you have to learn to be mature. And you will if you stay consistent with it.
6 signs someone is emotionally immature. Number 1, they get very defensive. Even gentle feedback feels like an attack. They'll argue, shut down, or turn it back on you because protecting their image is more important than fixing the problem. Mature people know how to hear criticism without turning to defensiveness. Number 2, they deflect blame. Emotionally immature people don't take accountability. They twist the story, blame others, or change the subject because their ego can't handle being wrong. Emotionally mature people can say, "That one's on me," without collapsing under shame. Number 3, they guilt trip. They don't just ask for what they want. They make you feel bad until you give in. It's not about communication, it's about control. Emotionally mature people ask for what they need, clearly, calmly, and directly. Number 4, they're passive aggressive. They don't confront you head on. Instead, they leave a sarcastic comment, slam a cabinet, or just go cold. It's a way to express resentment without risking rejection. But emotionally mature people say what's wrong out loud. Number 5, they weaponize their emotions. Emotionally immature people cry, vent, or spiral not to connect, but to pressure. They use emotion to overwhelm you and get their way. Mature people still feel deeply, but they don't use emotion as a tactic. Number 6, they triangulate. They bring a third person into the conversation, someone to deliver messages, take sides, or soften the blow. It's a way to avoid discomfort, but emotional maturity means facing hard conversations directly, not outsourcing them.
And that's what Mr. Cialdini's talking about in this book, Influence. He talks about scarcity as well. We value things more when they seem rare. And that's why, like, you see antiques, oh, it's rare, or people on Facebook, they use false marketing by saying things are classic, it's rare, this is vintage. They use false marketing terminology just to sell something that was, made just 10 years ago. It's interesting, but it's a marketing tactic. And here's a stat, audience members. One study Cialdini had done in 2001 on hotel guests, it said that hotel guests were 34% more likely to reuse towels when told that most other guests did the same. Pure social proof at work. And we follow those guidelines daily at our jobs. If we don't know what to do, we look around and, oh, okay, they're doing that. Well, I'm going to do the same thing because I don't want to be different than the people that are around me. And I want to let you listen to Robert speak on towels because I think this will give you an understanding of first chapter.
We added a different sign based on the principle of consensus, that people want to do what everybody else is doing. It said the majority of guests who stay at our hotel do recycle their towels at least once. That was absolutely true, and it increased compliance by 28%. The interesting thing is that was a completely costless message, and it's never, ever been used in any hotel in any city that I visited. And the reason is those managers don't know what the research says. One of the hopes in these books that I've been publishing on the influence process is to allow people outside of the academic community, the non-researchers, who in any meaningful way have paid for this research with their tax dollars, to learn what we found out about them with their money. They're entitled to know what we found out about them with their money. And so that's one of the purposes of the book, to be sure that we present this information to the wider public besides just the academic community in which the work was done.
Or one of the influences in the first chapter of the book Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. And to persuade somebody, you also have to understand how writing works. You have to understand ethos, pathos, and logos. And you have to be able to tie all three of those Greek writing principles to be able to be an effective writer. You got to be able to tie in, you got to be able to know your audience, the tone. You have to use the right context to express what you're trying to get across to your audience. And that's what I'm doing in this podcast. The You Only. This podcast is to help people develop skills that no one ever taught. It's to help somebody stand upright who's been beat down by circumstances and mental suppression. Because in life, this life is about gaining all the knowledge you possibly can while you're here. Other people's jobs here are to confine you to a space that you are no longer in the race against them, and they have no other competition. And that's going on everywhere around you right now as we speak. And thank you guys again for listening to the You Only podcast.
Hi, I'm Grace from the Philippines. Mabuhay! And I'm listening to the You Only podcast. I'm a huge fan.
At the You Only podcast, we're here to introduce books into people's lives that may give them a viewpoint that they never had before, to change their paradigm, to give them information that will empower them to grow and become someone else. In this book by Robert Cialdini, there is a connection to the podcast I did, Propaganda. Bernays is tied to this book as well, You Only listeners. Edward Bernays, remember, he is the pioneer of public relations, the nephew of Sigmund Freud. And I feel like he stole Sigmund Freud's ideas and used them to empower himself to wealth. He used social proof and authority to sell ideas. For example, remember, I had said this in Propaganda, the 1929 Torches of Freedom campaign, where he hired women to smoke Lucky Strikes in a parade to normalize female smoking. Look at what it did to the women in America. And also, in another episode, there's a connection to Goldman in emotional intelligence, self-awareness, empathy, regulation. Helps us notice when influence tactics hijack our emotions. And for example, we buy out of fear of missing out, FOMO, scarcity, or say yes because we feel guilty, and that is reciprocity, being reciprocal. I really enjoyed reading this book, and I feel like you would too, because influence is everywhere around us, the hidden persuaders of our daily lives. And thank you again for listening. Here is a real-life account of influence at work. During the COVID-19 pandemic, misinformation campaigns spread on social media. A study at MIT in 2018 found that false news spreads 6 times faster on Twitter than true stories because it triggers stronger emotional reactions: fear, anger, surprise. I've been a victim of that too, and that is what caused me to start questioning everything on social media, and I'll tell you about it. I came across the meme that said Prince, the pop singer, helped Michael Jordan, the basketball player, land his first deal with Nike. And I'm telling you, the endorphins in my brain just blew up. I couldn't believe it. And then I thought, I have to find out if that's true. And as soon as I looked on the internet, I seen Snoop's, and it said, no, that's fake. That's false information. And I thought to myself, I wonder how many times in the last 10 years I've read a meme and I thought, wow. Because I was brought up in an era where I was taught that the news and certain entities couldn't lie to us. They had to stay ethically sound and stay away from disinformation, which that was a bogus lie that they taught me. So anyways, back to what I was saying, that MIT 2018 study found that false news spreads 6 times faster on Twitter than true stories, and that's sad. In the book Propaganda, Bernays, it pretty much ties to the updated digital age. I feel like people with higher emotional intelligence were more likely to pause, fact check, and resist emotional manipulation. Here's the solution, fan members. Before sharing or reacting online, like when you read something or a video you watch, pause and ask, what emotion am I feeling right now? Who benefits if I believe or share this? That small moment of awareness interrupts emotional hijacking, and that's what this book has to do with. On a side note, the term emotional hijacking was popularized by Daniel Goleman. If you have experienced emotional hijacking, try to be mindful. Breathe. Remember your breath. In any circumstances where there is another human being, breathe when you feel in your gut, your spirit, your emotions, your mind. Breathe through these things that are causing you to feel those heightened emotions. And use the pause technique, because pausing for an emotional moment and giving yourself that moment to get into logical mode and not in my brain stuck inside of, oh no, what do I do? If you practice, words have wonders. In a 2019 study, the frontier in psychology found that even 10 minutes of mindful breathing reduced amygdala activity and increased prefrontal cortex regulation. That's why it works. Deep breathing slows the body's fight or flight freeze response, giving the rational brain time to engage, because the brain is receiving much more oxygen as you're breathing through it. Exhaling the negativity. That's what I always do when I try to breathe through something. And there's another breathing technique too, that this technique is you breathe like a half full lung and then breathe again and then exhale right away. And if you do this in a moment where someone else is causing your anxiety to go up, it triggers the brain to feel like it is falling asleep. It's simulating a sleep breathing pattern, so it relaxes you instantly, and then you focus on this person's words. And I'm telling you, try it one time. I promise you, in a heightened emotional situation, that breath technique right there has saved my life so many times. I've had a manager jump up and fly up into my face, screaming, yelling, cussing, and I breathed in once as he was propelling from his chair to my face. I breathed in halfway, I breathed in again, and I let it out. And you won't believe, I focused, and then I breathed a deep breath, and I breathed out again, and I looked at him, because he was in just a rage about nothing. And I said, hey, would you allow me to take you over there and show you what went on so you understand why it happened the way it did? And he was not receptive. So I looked at him and I said, well, have a good day. And I literally went over there, packed my tools, and I left. And they called me and begged me to come back. But anyways, no joke, they did. Breathing is important. And I breathed through that situation. So, I literally gave my brain the rational time to engage itself, because the brain is receiving that oxygen, giving me mental clarity, or giving you mental clarity in that moment of distress. I call deep breathing total consciousness, because I do it all the time, because I want my brain to be oxygenated. When I walk into a meeting at my work, which I have one every single day, I breathe 13 breaths hard, and I exhale hard. Then I breathe 12, 11, 10, and I get lightheaded. But that lightheadedness is not me passing out. That is my brain rejuvenating cells that are deadened, because I am always calm. I am in that comfort zone, that addiction comfort zone. And that's what a lot of us are. We don't see it, we don't think it, because, this is what life's about. I'm a human. I want to be comfort. But comfort can cause a lot of problems, and that's too much comfort. Too much comfort can cause a lot of problems. The too much of, or excess of anything, can cause a lot of problems. Thank you guys for listening to the You Only podcast. And today we're talking about Influence by Robert Cialdini. Check it out on Audible. I'm on Audible now, so check me out on Audible. I'm on Amazon. I'm on YouTube. I'm on TikTok. You Only, Lo Jackson. Check it out. Be a fan. Get it and get involved. I got polls on the podcast. You guys can tell me what you're thinking. I put some out there just so I can get some feedback. and see what's going on. I do see you guys watching and listening. I can see exactly how long you guys listen, stuff like that. And I'm trying to build this podcast to be more informative, because I'm realizing the more information I jam pack right away, a lot more listeners find it to be a better listen. So, audience, here's a look at influence and mental health and daily life influence. This book overlaps with two of my previous episodes. The overlap of Bernays, Cialdini, Goleman. Bernays showed how mass influence works. Cialdini broke down the psychological triggers in this book, Influence. So check this book out, definitely. It's an awesome read. Goleman taught us how to regulate our inner world against these triggers. Together, they teach us influence isn't always bad. Persuasion builds communities, sells ideas, spreads awareness. But when unchecked, it manipulates fears and creates unhealthy patterns. And that's something that we have to start being self-aware about. Who is trying to manipulate us and why? Who in our lives does such things as they cause situations to happen, and then the other person doesn't have emotional intelligence, so they have a reaction. Then the person that caused this person to have a reaction says, oh, you made me feel this way when you got all crazy like that, blah, 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 blah. But in reality, if the person was made to feel this way, realize that the person that caused this problem to happen it's a type of manipulation. When somebody does something, this other person overreacts because they're not emotionally aware of themselves or what's going on. So the person that created the situation was creating the situation and didn't realize what was going to happen. And the person having a reaction to the situation is a type of manipulation. And those are things that people aren't aware of. So anyway.
People that are always in anticipation and desire and seeking, that's wonderful for pursuing goals. However, it's terrible for enjoying life. And actually, those people are actually quite difficult to be around. There's a certain almost sociopathic element to people who are what they call hyper-dopaminergic, people who are always on the dopaminergic scale, to the point where they are always pursuing goals. In fact, those people are known to be, at least in the psychological spectrum, they can be very manipulative. Dopamine and the pursuit of something doesn't necessarily have to be high energy and intense from the outside when you observe it from the outside. In fact, there are people who will manipulate in order to get what they want. This has been shown, who have high levels of dopamine release in their brain, but they've learned that a kind of passive manipulation is the best way to maneuver through a particular environment.
It's back to influence, and hopefully you're enjoying this. Emotional intelligence is the antidote. Awareness of our feelings make us less predictable targets. Our emotions make us targets when others are more in tune. And that's what I was getting at with that last scenario. Because if you're in tune with yourself, how can someone else manipulate you when you know what you want, you know what you like? And that's why that saying was, treat others the way you want to be treated, because you're going to come across so many different walks of individuals in life, and they come from everywhere. At UCLA, neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman's MRI study showed that putting feelings into words like saying, I feel angry, reduces amygdala activation and increases activity in the right ventrolateral prefrontal cortex, and which is that is the regulation area of the brain. The ventrolateral prefrontal cortex, it tells you to be calm. It allows endorphins to be released that calm you. It also allows endorphins like adrenaline to get you sparked. And if we don't slow down and realize that these, what they call buttons people press, are really us not doing the inner workings that adults used to do when they weren't so caught off guard by so many different things that cause us to not focus on our inner selves. And a lot of times we just do these things. We do things over a period of time that we don't even realize that we're doing, because those are